glad you're all here. Those of you who joined us from the public, great to see everybody from the board. We will begin with public comment, and in the format of the renaming, public comment will be the period when you can actually comment on that renaming request. So if I think Sean is going to introduce that process, but when you do go to make your comment, just state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes and mics. So with that, I can hand it to Sean.
Great. Well, thank you again for having us here. Last time I restrained myself and we kept it to at least a baker's dozen of people making public comments. Tonight, out of respect for your time, we've kept it to a half dozen. There is such a deep love for Greg Poole and for all he did for this community. We could have brought you hundreds of people, but we also understand that you've read the materials and heard folks, and so we pared it down to this. And so I'm happy to hand it over to Michael, and there's 6 folks who won the lottery to speak a little bit on Greg's behalf tonight.
All right, for those of you that will be speaking this evening, will you please click on the raise hand button so I can see you in the attendees section, and I'll unmute you to talk one at a time. We're going to go ahead and start with Betsy Bennett. I will unmute you right now. Go ahead. One second, Betsy.
Have you unmuted me?
Yep, you're unmuted now.
Okay. So thank you for letting me speak tonight. I'm Betsy Bennett, former museum director of the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences and currently strategic counsel with Capital Development Services. I live at 1779 Purple Sage Lane in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, but actually spend most of my time in Raleigh when I'm on the road. And I'm here to enthusiastically support honoring Greg Poole by naming the chapel at Dix Park the Greg Poole Jr. All Faiths Chapel. Greg Poole worked tirelessly with vision and passion to make Dix Park a reality. For over 20 years, he met with friends and community leaders to advocate and garner support for a destination park for Raleigh and North Carolina. You would often hear Greg say, "What do we need to do for Dix Park today?" I accompanied Greg on numerous meetings with potential supporters, and he was always greeted warmly and with great respect. Therefore, Greg was successful in raising a significant amount of the planning money for Dix Park. In part, this planning money was raised on Greg's vision of the park and has been used to fund the master plan for the park and to fund a variety of community activities in partnership with the city and park staff. Greg loved the chapel and had a special interest in the chapel gardens, so he also worked with the city park staff to help restore the chapel gardens and surrounding wall. Naming the chapel the Greg Poole Jr. All Faiths Chapel is a fitting tribute and honor to Greg Poole and his Dix Park legacy. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And next up will be Bob Hatley. Go ahead, Bob.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Thank you for this opportunity. Again, my name is Bob Hatley. My address is 402 Hogan's Valley Way in Cary, 27513. I am a recently retired CEO of Paragon Bank in Raleigh, now Town Bank. So I have had a great deal of my life in the Raleigh market and knowing a lot of folks. I don't need to tell you about Greg Poole. You know about him. Everybody in Raleigh and in the Triangle either knows Greg or knows of Greg and what he has done in our community and what he has done for our community. Everyone knows his vision for Dix Park and his hard work and perseverance to get others to share his vision of a great park for this community. He approached me about 12 years ago with his idea for this grand park on the Dix Hospital site and he was putting a group together called the Dix Park Visionaries. This park would be unlike anything in the country except for a handful of parks, much akin to the New York Central Park. I would call that vision. My company was among the first to contribute to the cause. If it had been anybody else asking, I'm doubtful that my bank would have participated in such a wild idea at the time. I did it with little knowledge of the project, but with a great deal of respect for Greg Poole. I have been involved with projects in my career, but none of the magnitude that Greg envisioned. I'm here to talk for a minute or so about integrity and class. You know all the bio. I got to know Greg in the 80s, and we both served on the Cary Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors. I consider him a mentor on how to work with other business leaders on a common cause. To get board members with all healthy egos to be united after healthy discussions is a gift that many people do not possess. Greg had that gift. He listened, he learned, and he understood other points of view. Greg had that gift. He treated everyone as though they were his best friend. He appreciated other people's points of view and let them know it. Greg had that gift. He absolutely loved his community and worked tirelessly for his community with no personal agenda. Greg had that gift. When Greg called anyone in the community, his call was always returned because he was either offering help or asking for a favor. The favor was never for him, but rather for his community. Greg had that gift. It is indeed rare to be a genuinely nice person and yet accomplish great things for one's business and one's community. Ruthless was never used to describe him. Greg had that gift. Every community needs a Greg Poole. I can think of no better tribute to recognize a true community and Dix Park proponent than by naming the All Faith Chapel for Greg Poole. He never would have asked for that recognition. I am. I thank you for your consideration to honor this great man. I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Next up is Bev Perdue. One moment.
Am I unmuted?
You're unmuted now.
Great. Thank you for your service, all of you, the members of the Parks, Recreation, and Greenway Commission. I'm really proud of the work you're doing. Greg Poole, I'm here to join with others in urging you to rename the chapel the Greg Poole Jr. All Faiths Chapel. And I'll tell you why. I'm not going to do any of the bio or any of the things that you know. I'm going to talk about Greg the man. His wife, Mary Ann Poole, was my college roommate. So we have been friends and have a lot of stories to tell for the last 40 or 50 years. And Greg was one of those rare individuals that you meet once or twice in your lifetime who was essentially just a good man. And he was blessed with the resources to help other people. So Greg, from the first time I met him, always had a mission. He was helping a church. He was helping a ministry. He was investing in the education of a student who couldn't afford to go to college. He was all the time doing really good things. And he never told you about it. If you found out, it was by error. He didn't want any credit for anything that he did. He just wanted to do. He loved Raleigh. I can't tell you the times that he and my husband, Bob, would ride around the beautiful city and he'd tell you the history. He knew everything about Raleigh and when it was done and where it was and how it was changed. He was just one of those people who loved where he was born, and he stayed there forever and was as proud of it the day he died as he was the day he was born. He always had a cause. So he would sometimes help an employee start a business, or he'd find somebody to mentor. He needed to act like he needed to give back. I think that was what his life was all about, giving back and building a better world. Well, Greg was also like a dog with a bone. I have to tell you that. He came to talk to me about Dix Park as he did others. The problem with talking to me about it over a 10-year period was that I was either the lieutenant governor or the governor, and the state of North Carolina owns the land. And I listened to him talk about his vision. I kept thinking, if we could make this happen, if Greg and this group of investors in the future, the investors, not just in Raleigh, you all, but in the state of North Carolina, the people, the citizens like me, given $5 to build this wonderful, magnificent gateway to the city of Raleigh and to the state of North Carolina for little children from Halifax or from Madison County to come to Raleigh and see a real park with all of the beautiful things that have been laid out in this master plan. That was Greg's vision. He didn't care about anything for himself. He never once talked about that. We walked by All Faiths Chapel one day, and he was a deep Christian. He told me about the chapel, and he told me about his fear that sometimes somebody would destroy the chapel, would move it, would develop it. He had a real concern about that. And I'm so thrilled that I got to be just a small part in helping realize Greg's gift of dreaming big dreams and doing big things, and finally figuring out a way and collaborating with so many others of us to make Dix Park a reality. I urge you, as members of this body, to forward his name to City Council or whatever your process is. You'll never regret doing this. You'll never find a skeleton in his closet. You'll only find lots of stars and one big crown, and that crown's called Greg Poole Jr. Thank you.
Thank you. Sean Ingram. Go ahead, Sean.
Hello, how you doing tonight? Definitely an honor to be before you to speak on Mr. Gregory Poole. Like the others said before me, I'm definitely not going to go into his, just long list of attributes and kindness. I just want to tell y'all a quick story right fast, if y'all don't mind. I met Mr. Poole originally, I think, at a chamber meeting. And so this story goes over a couple of years. And this is one of my reasons why I really believe that it should be changed to the All Faith Chapel in his honor, because he was truly he was a person for all people, if that make any sense, right? So when I first met Mr. Greg, it was at a chamber meeting. And you talking about maybe 6 months go by, then I think I see him again. I think I was at the city club somewhere, and time would go by. And maybe a year passed at this point. And I remember it was actually at a Dix Park Conservancy meeting, I think, over off of Oberlin Road. And I remember Jay would say, "Hey, Sean, I'm going to introduce you to Greg." And Mr. Greg came in and he put his arm around me and said, "Hey, I know Sean. It's Sean Ingram of the Sean Ingram Academy." So from a little black boy that come from outside of Wilson, North Carolina, down a dirt path with an outhouse, to have somebody of his stature, his magnitude. I see Mr. Kendall Harris on this also, so he knows my background from poverty to prison to prosperity. That's who I am. And every time Mr. Greg saw me, he never treated me any differently. He always put his hand around my shoulder, and he always gave me just nuggets and gems of advice, whether it was 2 or 3 times or it could be a year later, and he would always just put his hand around me, 20 or 30 seconds. So I'm really just appreciative of him as a person. And honestly, I said, this is a guy that I want to be like as a leader, as a man, as a father, as a leader in the community. So it's an honor for me to sit before you today, but I truly want you to understand that in my eyes, he was a person for all people. His vision for through Dix Park was for all people, regardless of race, regardless of, like you said, religion. He truly, in my eyes, saw a vision that brought equality, unity, and inclusion for all. So I thank you for your time. And I truly do thank all of you for considering even changing it to Mr. Gregory Poole of All Faiths Chapel. Thank you greatly.
Thank you. Stuart Kent. Go ahead, Stuart.
Can you all hear me?
Yep, we can.
Okay. Well, my name is Stuart. I want to thank you all for your time, and I appreciate being here to be a part of this very deeply. I want to tell you a little bit of a story. When I was a child, I grew up pretty poor And I went to Wiley Elementary School in downtown Raleigh, which, as you all well know, I'm sure, is just a few blocks from Dorothea Dix. We used to sneak onto the Dorothea Dix property as a child and wander around, mostly because we thought it was a beautiful place. And a lot of years went by. I have always thought about that place and always thought about how special it is to me. I've always had a deep connection with the medicine that was done there. My understanding of that place has always been very deep and very personal. I went to a lot of places over my life, and ultimately became a U.S. Fulbright scholar, and got a phone call years after I had moved out of the country, moved back to the country, from a man named Greg, who tells me that he's a woodworker. And he says, "I've got this idea I want you to be a part of, and I want you to help me with." And I said, "Sure, Greg." I had no idea who he was. I said, "Sure, Greg, I'll help you do anything you need to do." And he said, "Well, we're building a park, and I want you to be a part of it. And I want to know you." And I said, "Okay." That started probably the deepest and most profound friendship that I've had in my adult life. And that park is Dorothea Dix Park. And Greg became a trusted confidant to me. He became a deep friend to me, a mentor to me in many ways. And we did a lot of great things together. And many of those things have been in support of Dix Park. I continue to work with Sean and the Conservancy and several people around Dix Park in support of the park, and I will continue to do that work in Greg's name in many ways. I have to echo some of the things that were said by the governor and by some of the other speakers, that Greg was about all people. Greg was about the smallest people, the biggest people. He saw everybody in the same light, and he wanted to know who you were, where you were from, and what you could contribute. And I felt like he really looked for the deepest and best parts of us as people. And he sort of demanded that we be the best versions of ourselves. And I think that connection for me as a child to Dix Park, and now as an adult to Dix Park, getting to know Greg the way I did, I think is a testament to his faith, is a testament to what I would consider to be divine intervention. I think there is just a profound connection to the place, to the city, to the people of Raleigh with Greg. And I think there's a lasting effect of his true commitment to making Dix Park a place for everyone. I cannot say strongly enough how much I support the idea of renaming, of all the buildings on Dix Park's campus, renaming that chapel in his name. I think is just probably the most important building to him spiritually that you could possibly do. I think it will stand as a place for him in a lot of ways, in the deepest parts of his heart, for all the people to be able to come, no matter what their background is, no matter where they're from, that it is truly a place for the people. Again, I thank you, and I really urge you to take this very seriously. I think of all the people that could possibly have been involved with this, Greg was the champion of champions.
Great, thank you. We have one more commenter tonight, and I don't see that person's name on the list, but there's a couple of numbers. So if you had called in and you're Sherwood Smith, If you would push the 9 button on your phone, that will raise your hand and I can unmute you to talk.
What a shame.
Okay, I don't see that person raising their hand, so that's all we have right now.
Thank you for all of your comments. We can really feel your passion. I think I speak for the whole board when we say that we can really feel your passion and how much you care about this process. For those of you who are joining us for the first time tonight, the way the process works for us is that we actually have our discussion tonight to talk about what we've heard so far and what we've read in the packet. We don't vote on it tonight. We vote on it at the next meeting, but there won't be discussion there. And then that gets forwarded to council. I believe the timeline right now is for that to happen in early November for council to take action on that. So with that, does anybody have any thoughts or comments they would like to contribute? Yep, Dr. Love. You're muted.
Myself? Okay. The presentations have been moving, very thorough, and I appreciate all that they brought. And some of those people I know personally that have presented, so I would think that we should have no issue moving forward.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Love. Any other thoughts?
Brad, Marcia had wanted to speak.
Yeah, Marcia. I think you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. I really wish I'd heard the comments that were made last month for the meeting I missed. But what I've heard tonight is very affirming, and I wish I'd known the man. So I agree with Dr. Love. I think this shouldn't have much trouble with this.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, everybody's heard about Gregory Poole. Ain't no other name has come up. I mean, so there's no secret about it, right? I mean, so let's just be cut through the chase. Gregory Poole owned a contract company, went to Chapel Hill. He done a lot with Camp O'Kill in Oxford, North Carolina, was a philanthropic giver. No other name has come up. I don't think we need 15 names to speak about him next meeting, unless it's somebody else. I think everybody's been transparent about Gregory Poole. You know, what he's meant to the Raleigh area. So that's, you know, you won't name it after me.
Brad, if I could say something. The only thing that I had wondered about last week after hearing all the comments was if the chapel was the right thing to be named after him at the park. Because it seemed like he had such a big influence with the entire park, and whether the chapel was the right move. But I think after hearing tonight the comments about how, you know, he really cared about people from all different faiths and cultures and sort of the religious side as well, I think that makes a lot of sense. So it has my support. Yeah.
Brad, a quick question, seriously. I mean, who else's name is on here besides name? I mean, I'm not trying, I mean, I have written no. Who else's name is besides Gregory Poole is on this thing? Because I don't have time to wait in 45 minutes to talk about him again like we did last time. Who else's name is on here?
Well, it's not the way it works. They proposed the name change for the chapel to honor him.
Right.
That's the way that.
And he sold Gregory Poole about 5 years ago. Those contractors. So if there's another name come up, I don't think we need to hear 10, 12 other names about him. Bear Perdue was on here tonight. Other people. Last time we spent 35, 40 minutes talking about him. Get a man his flowers. He's dead and gone. Give his flowers. He's dead and gone now. Just go ahead and just put a vote to it and make it happen.
That's what we'll do next week. That's the only thing we do. We don't even talk about it.
Yeah, folks.
Next month, right?
Next month, yeah. We're not going to start meeting weekly. I'm not going to hang on for the last.
Yes, we don't
For
need
my last month.
Don't need to beat the horse up. Spend 30 minutes talking about this man again next meeting.
Cool. All right. Any other thoughts? Or we can move to our next item. Thanks you all for joining us tonight. We really appreciate having you here. And appreciate your comments and your thoughtful words. And thanks for the discussion of the group. We're just going to move to regular business now. We have
thanks to all of you.
Yep. Thanks, Sean, for joining us. Next, we have PRCR team programs. The Raleigh Youth Council presentation.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Hope you all are doing great this evening. Our first presentation we have for you this evening is a presentation about the Raleigh Youth Council, and it is going to be given by two of our staff members, Carmen Miles and Kent Hunt, who oversee our Park Recreation and Cultural Resources team programs. So what they're going to be doing is giving an overview of the Raleigh Youth Council program, including its function, its mission, and involvement in the community. And then also this is kind of related to how you all had talked about engaging more youth in the park board. And so this is going to be an opportunity that maybe y'all want to discuss afterwards on how to possibly engage a youth liaison from the Raleigh Youth Council on a PRGAB. So without further ado, I am going to hand it over to both Kent and Carmen to give their presentation.
Thank you. My name is Kent Hunt. I work with the Raleigh Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Department. I'm just pulling up a quick slideshow so we can go through that as we talk through this, Carmen and I. And what the Raleigh Youth Council is essentially is a forum for high schoolers throughout Wake County. And when we had the opportunity to come and present to you all about the opportunities for youth engagement, it was something that Carmen and I both are really excited about, especially for the opportunity to be more engaged within our own department and city from a youth leadership standpoint. So we're just going to give you a little bit of the background of what the program's all about, and then talk about a little bit of an idea that we had and how we might be able to come together and function to provide a youth involvement and voice into the Parks, Recreation, and Greenway Advisory Board. So to get started, just kind of the RYC basics. The Raleigh Youth Council is a leadership group for teens, and it's for teens, or by teens for teens. So our teens, we have an 8-teen elected executive board that is elected by their peers yearly. They're responsible for creating the agenda items, as well as leading the meetings and operating in that fashion. Our main focus is on leadership, civic engagement, community service, fundraisers, and we also participate in a lot of recreational outings to try to make sure our teams have that sense of togetherness. Our Raleigh Youth Council is a chartered member of the State Youth Council, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that's involved in just a minute. So in 2009, just a little bit about our council composition. We had 91 members that represented 21 different area high schools, as well as 16 zip codes. And so you can kind of see on our map, we have young people coming from all across the city. We actually meet at Laurel Hills Community Center, which is kind of, relatively close to Crabtree Valley Mall, if that gives you a sense of where our main program is headquartered. But you can see we have teens coming from all over the city for that program. Carmen, if you want to talk to them a little bit about what our meetings consist of and some of the other opportunities.
All right, great. So again, my name is Carmen Miles. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what the council is all about. So the Raleigh Youth Council meets, like Kent mentioned, at Laurel Hills Community Center. We meet every second and fourth Monday of the month from 7 to 8 p.m. Currently, we are not meeting at the community center due to the different regulations, but we are still meeting virtually. The meetings are led by the executive board, which are those 8 members that are elected through the council, and they come up with different activities that the teens do, different projects, and speakers that they want to come to the meetings and talk to them about different topics and things that they are interested in. In some of the past meetings, those topics included youth involvement. We've partnered with the Raleigh Police Department in the past to help them create a youth summit, and some of our teams from the council were a big part of that. We also have had like college and financial aid people come out and just talk to the teens about what opportunities are available to them. We do team building and leadership. Leadership is a big part of the council. We're always looking for opportunities for them to be leaders in the community. We do public speaking and debates, just getting them some critical thinking skills and working with them on some different things that they may need to utilize later in life. Job preparation, we've had different people come out and speak to them about the opportunities available for teenagers, specifically within the city of Raleigh, but also just prepping them for jobs moving forward in life. We have health and wellness representatives. Our health and wellness program director with PRCR came out and spoke to the teams about different things like time management and just self-awareness and bullying and things that may be currently going on in their lives. We just make sure that we offer opportunities for them to have a platform to speak on those different things. Within the council, we also do a lot of community service. That's a big part of the Raleigh Youth Council. Each year we have what we call RYC sponsored events. These are community service activities that are put on by the council. They have created them and they are responsible for putting them on each year. Two of those events that are pretty similar are our specialized recreation Halloween and Valentine's Day dance. These are dances that we put on for the specialized recreation community and have them come out, and the dances are specifically for this community, and our teens decorate and set them up for them, and we allow other teenagers throughout the community to come and be a part of this community service. In addition to those two community services, we have what we call Santa's Workshop and Toys from Teens, and these are two events that we are doing toy drives. We offer one at a community center where we collect toys and we do different crafts for the community. These are both free programs, and then we offer the other weekend we go and we give the toys away to a different community, and we do the same crafts and allow the teens to work with the youth in the community, and it's just a really fun field day. In addition to our RYC community service opportunities, we do community service outside of the ones that we create. RYC is a sponsor community service events. In addition, we've done volunteers over 500 hours in 2019, and some of those other opportunities included we recycle at North Carolina State. Park cleanups are a big part of our community service that we do. It's invasive species removal. We volunteered at Dorothea Dix Park for several events, including Raleigh Tamale. And then we've also do other PRCR events that may include different festivals in the community, and any type of events that the community centers are hosting. We try our best to support in any way that we can. Kim mentioned before that we do recreational outings. This is an opportunity for the teens to really build a bond within the council. A lot of times when we're meeting, we're doing a lot of community service and we're doing our meetings. And so this is just a fun field opportunity for them to get together and just do some things that they enjoy and get to know each other and build some relationships. So we've done things in the past like Fear Farm, ice skating, bowling, just fun opportunities that the teens kind of pick out that they would like to do.
And then we'll kind of talk a little bit, switching gears into some of the past civic engagement. And that's really what we're here to kind of talk about tonight, and how we can be more engaged with the Parks, Recreation, and Greenway Advisory Board. But just a couple of examples of things that we've done in the past with the Raleigh Youth Council. We had several of our members sat on the System Planning Committee back when the PRCR department went on to craft that system plan about 5 or 6 years ago. Well, I guess it's probably closer to 8 now. We also had a Drift initiative, which was our Drive Responsible initiative for teens. This was a project that we had funded through the Allstate Foundation. And we were essentially going out and doing peer-to-peer education about safe driving. We partnered with both Wake County Public School System as well as the Raleigh Police Department to kind of put several different events over a 3-year stretch. We've partnered with Go Raleigh, especially during their opportunity or whenever the free bus passes went out for the folks that were under 18. We partnered with them on that. We also had hosted a delegation from Morocco where we talked to them about youth involvement and how to be more involved with youth back in their home country. We participate in the Youth Legislative Assembly, which is kind of a mock legislative assembly at the General Assembly in downtown Raleigh. And then we also have a city council liaison who we speak with about once or twice a year to try to figure out how we can stay connected with city council as well. And then the last piece before we kind of talk through through our idea about how we could connect is Carmen will just kind of talk a little bit about the State Youth Council and what that's all about.
And so the State Youth Council is basically where RYC meets with other councils throughout the state to become one unit council. RYC is a chartered member of the State Youth Council, and that is under the leadership of the North Carolina Department of Administration. And basically, when they attend these conferences, there are 4 different types of leadership conferences that they host. Different councils host each year. So the Raleigh Youth Council will travel to different cities to do different activities that the conferences are about. So those conferences include service learning, which is basically we go to a different city and do community service in that city. The mini grant conference is a conference where the teens have an opportunity to delegate funds to different grants that have been submitted for different youth opportunities. They have a team building and leadership conference where they really get to dive into some different leadership opportunities and do some team building. And the spring convention is a conference where the teens are rewarded for their all of their work that they've done throughout the school year, and they're able to recognize the different opportunities that the teens have done within their councils. We did actually host a conference in 2019. We hosted the Team Building and Leadership Conference here in Raleigh. It was a huge success. Participation from over 120 teams throughout North Carolina. 10 different councils participated in our conference. Teens traveled from teens traveled to several parks and recreation parks, highlighting our diverse park resources, and groups toured Dix Park and presented a recommendation for future youth activities to the Dix Park planners and the Conservancy members. And the conference itself was just a huge success. And they still are talking about how great Raleigh is in every time that we visit other cities. So we're very proud to have been able to put that on in 2019. And this is a picture of the teens. They had just done their presentations to the Conservancy members, presenting their different opportunities that they thought that they would like to see at Dix Park. And this is just a picture of all the teens that participated in that.
All right, so the last thing we just wanted to kind of touch on was when we heard there was an opportunity to get engaged with the advisory board. It was something that Carmen and I had been working on for several years, not specifically with the advisory board, but looking for ways that we can be more involved from a government or a civic standpoint. So one of the thoughts that we had was that we could elect a person or have the members of our youth council elect a youth liaison to the Parks, Recreation, and Greenway Advisory Board. And the youth liaison responsibilities would essentially be that they would attend these meetings with the Parks, Recreation, and Greenway Advisory Board. During those meeting times, they'd be gathering information, issues, topics, initiatives that you all may have. Report those pieces back to our Raleigh Youth Council members at their next meeting, looking for input on specific issues, topics, especially things that really interest teens, or even maybe something that the board might have a specific interest in youth voice on, and then report that feedback from the Raleigh Youth Council to the advisory board, whether that be formally through this meeting or through like an appointed liaison or designee from the board, but talk about what the Raleigh Youth Council and its members, what kind of feedback that they got from different issues and topics and initiatives that the Parks, Recreation, and Greenway Advisory Board had presented. So that's kind of what the the Raleigh Youth Council is in a nutshell, and kind of our idea about how we can be more connected moving forward.
Great. Thanks, Carmen and Kent. Any thoughts, y'all? Questions? Yeah, Marcia.
I am excited about this. When I was on the Poland Park Master Planning Committee in 1999, 2000, we asked the Parks Department to have somebody from the youth council to serve, and that happened. Her name is Jessica. I'm blanking on her last name right now, but she has gone on and has and she's a Parks and Rec professional now. She works in California, but she's in Raleigh. I'm going to see her next week. So Puckett, Jessica Puckett's her name. But anyway, this is wonderful. Yes, I'm all for it. So.
Awesome. Thanks, Marcia. Dr. Love.
I want to say thank you for making this presentation. I brought the issue up. Many years ago, I did an internship with the State Youth Council when I was working on my master's degree. And I have this interest in young people and they're being connected and developing leadership skills. So thank you for the presentation. And I do hope we will follow through and get a youth liaison on our board.
It's great. Beverly.
I have some just sort of nuts and bolts questions, and that would be, can they share with us how these young people are chosen to be on the youth council? And also, with 2 meetings a month, that's quite a commitment, and sort of give us a sense of, as busy as young people are today, what your average attendance is and that kind of thing.
And well, our council members we have an open door policy, open door where you can join the council on your own free will. So basically, the members of the council just kind of invite their friends, invite their schoolmates. It's pretty much open to anyone who lives in the Raleigh area and to attend the meetings and hear about what we're doing. And if they find interest in the meeting, then they join our activities. The council executive board has come up with a plan to make the teens have to commit by doing some things before they actually become a official member of the council. And that's basically just attending meetings and participating in community service. And once they've shown that they are committed to the council, we then officially make them a member. But the teens just come on their free will with some recruiting. We do have a publicity chair who is in charge of recruiting members to attend our meetings and let the community know about what we're doing. And so that's pretty much the bulk of our recruiting for the council. There's no registration or requirements in order to get in. If you are interested, you pretty much can be a part of it. And as far as our meetings, we have several, so we'll have a larger council, so there may be 60 to 80 participants in the council. But at a regular meeting, we'll see anywhere from 25 to 35 participants show up to the meetings every second and fourth Monday. We just had a meeting on Monday virtually, and there were about 27 participants at that meeting.
So just, I wonder if there's a step beyond liaison that could be taken, just because when I've had to do liaison with other committees, it felt like some kind of strange pre-internet formality where I was like just there to like report back whatever happened in that meeting. If we want actual youth influence on our board, can we not just have a youth member in a seat? Not to take anything away from that relationship with the youth council, just that I think the liaisons are, I mean, you're literally, you go there and you observe and then you report back what you've seen. It's a very strange type of role.
I agree. Yeah. Clodagh has a comment.
Yeah, Claude.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think David, your point is well taken, but from what I understood Carmen to say is that there was a much more involved process for the teams. So they would sit as a liaison on the board, but then report back to their group and then discuss the issues and carry it out further. So it seems to me there's a much more meatier piece to it, as it were, that involves a lot more youth than just sitting as a liaison. And I may have misunderstood, but that's what I heard from Carmen.
If I could add to that, I think it sort of depends on how we set it up and how we encourage that to happen. So, I've been liaison to some other committees where it is much more like what David was saying, and you feel like you're just sort of sitting in the audience and reporting back. And then, I've been to ones where you're much more involved and you have a seat at the table and you can do everything except vote, essentially. So you can participate in the conversation and ask questions, and then hopefully report back to your report back to the youth council would be the idea, and find a way to really work together and collaborate. So, I think if we kind of steer it toward that model, it could be a more useful exercise.
Question.
Yeah, Dave and then Carol.
How long do the student or do the youth typically stay involved, and would we be able to expect some consistency in the liaison, like a year term at least, so they would get the full story of what we're doing?
I think our thoughts are that we would actually select one of the executive board members that is already committed to being on our council for the school year. Currently, we don't operate our council through the summer. We do still communicate with our executive board through the summer, but we were thinking that it would probably be beneficial to have a member that is already committed to a role in our council for that time, so that it will be some consistency there with that member.
Thanks.
And I think the initial idea was to have them serve a 1-year term. That was the initial idea.
Carol?
I concur with Jennifer. I went to serve on the environmental awards jury, and I found it very active. And I'm sure there are times when I filled in for there was a time when I filled in for Lex on the Neuse River Blueway meeting, and it was the other way. I did observe, I took notes, I reported it. I didn't involve myself in the discussion. So I agree with Jennifer. We can make it as active as we want it to be, and as in conversation with the youth council and Carmen and Kent, we can make it whatever you want it to be, and whatever together the youth council and we can make it what we want it to be. I do think it's important to hear from the youth member, representative, liaison, whatever you want to call it. But I would like them not to have a really passive role. I would like to hear them when that person is called upon by, say, the chair or another member. What do you think? I would like to hear that sometimes. Thank you.
Kendall?
Carmen, Kent, great job. I think the work that you've done with teens is critical. Their voice needs to be heard. We have to be careful as adults when we want to be a liaison. We say we don't want to do anything, but we want our voice to be heard too. Our voice is sometimes irrelevant. So their voice needs to be heard because they're the ones that are the future. And therefore, I think it's our job, if we're going to be a liaison, to report back to this committee here to support Carmen and Kent. I don't need nobody at 50 years old going and telling teens what they need to be doing. They're the ones that are doing the work, pushing this agenda, and figuring out what is right. So again, as we're moving forward with everything else, with propaganda, that voices are critical. It's just like if you are a parent and you're a teen, you go to a meeting, your teens are not going to speak freely if you're in those meetings because you're in there. So the more that the adults are not involved, the more that the teens are going to talk to Carmen and Kent, because guess why? Kent and Carmen should be the ones that have the relationship with those teens. And Dexter, if I'm wrong, let me know, because this is something in my expertise that I do. The teens are voices, the millennials are going to be more critical and important more than ever than what we're talking about, because some of us are not irrelevant. And I'm talking about me. So let's just make sure that when we're talking about what we need to ask Kent and Carmen, what do they need? What support do they need? How can we support them from our lens as a Park and Greenway committee? Because these teens are going through some things differently than something else of us have ever been through before in our lives. They ain't never been through no COVID. And think about this. If I was a high school senior right now, I'd be going crazy right now. So some of us adults right now are going crazy, but we don't know how a teen feels. So therefore, those are questions we got to ask Kent and Carmen. How can we support you? What role does it look like? What can we do?
That's what they were saying. That giving a liaison to the board would be a good way to sort of connect the two.
And my point is, as a liaison, our job is to listen.
Yeah, for sure. And I think to Carol's point, and a few others, I think it should be a spot on the agenda so that it's a formalized thing where they report to us, like what's going on in their world, what they're seeing, what they're frustrated by, what's bubbling up through their view. I think that makes sense. Just like it's just almost an ex officio sort of member for the school year that they're on. That's sort of what I'm hearing the value there. Beverly and Lindsay, I'm sorry.
Well, I want to follow up with what Kendall was saying, because I think that we need to think about how we involve more than just one child, one student, and there are different master plans that, like Marcia was talking about, different ways to involve more students. Some might be 1 year as a liaison to our board, but I think opening up the larger horizon to have that input, knowing that we have this youth council and these interested young people, that how we can use them in more different ways. And I think that is our board working more with Kent and Carmen.
Yes, totally agree.
Just as an aside, I think that they made that a big emphasis with the community committee that they just appointed for Dix Park. A good number of them are actually under 22, I think was their focus, or even in high school years. So just as an aside, I know that the staff has worked both with folks who are already involved in these organizations with the work that Carmen and Kent are doing, but also that they've made that a focus of when they're pulling together committees. Lindsay?
Thank you, Carmen and Kent. It was a great presentation. I read on the agenda and I was looking forward to hearing more about it. So this is really insightful and exciting, and definitely also, like someone else said, impressive that they have a 2 times a month commitment, and you have that kind of turnout consistent. And I think the youth are especially thirsty, hungry to be engaged right now, and feeling deprived in other ways. Although I lead a volunteer chapter of advocates working on poverty issues. And I talked to one of my 17-year-olds, and she said she's kind of glad it's happening now, because then she can really live it up in college, but they're missing periods of their life. And so, but going back to some of the other comments as well, I would like to see, what kind of role would they want to have, but also would be nice if they're not just reporting and then sitting to watch, but to be able to participate, because I would like to hear from them as like a bonus member to our board, so I think there's a lot of potential there, and it's really exciting. So I could see how, our dialogue can really grow and expand as well with having their contributions and influence. So thank you.
Thanks, Lindsay. And I echo that. I think an ex officio type role is much more, and if we think of the scope of our liaisons, that's the way we liaise with the Arts Commission. And I think Historic Resources Board is sort of the model there, where we actually sit on the dais. We're sort of part of the conversation. We have a spot on the agenda. A few of the others we don't. We sort of sit observationally, and those we tend to not be that engaged with, to be fair. I think patterning it after that would be good. Any other thoughts?
Yeah. So how do we create policy around that to ensure that we have the participation? Because currently in policy they couldn't officially serve, right? And so how do we ensure that we create the policy to make sure that they participate and ensure that we don't play tokenism with teams, because we don't need the token team on the one voice, on the board. So to Kendall's and Beverly's point, it's about us listening and understanding what our teams need and are saying. But how do we clear the path for these things to be possible? And I think we as adults need to be able to do that, clear the path, and hand the baton off.
And Dr. Love.
Perhaps, I know we have to deal with the policy and all of that, but could we not have a meeting with all of them? So we go to their site. Have a discussion.
Speak that again. Dr. Love, you broke up a little bit.
We have a meeting, all of us, our board, with their group, if they would invite us, or however we could arrange that, so that we could listen to the body, all of them, in a setting. And we can work out this policy thing over time, but I believe that we could set up a meeting so that we could hear from them, let them know generally what parks are being developed, what master plans are underway, and find out from them, well, what would they like us to do? How would they like to be involved with us? So that's my suggestion. Let's have a meeting, a gathering.
I think that's great, Dr. Love. I agree with you wholly. I think that's a question to ask Carmen and Kent, because adults, we can come across as intimidating, and we have to give them time to be proactive, to understand what our questions are going to be. What is the pre-work going to look like? What questions are we going to ask them? Because we want to make sure they're set up for success. So yeah, I don't mind that, but also some of us will operate off our hips, and then it can strive and push teams away. Now, Kent and Carmen, the reason I'm so passionate on teams is I've been doing it for almost 20-something years. So that's what I do for a living. So I get it. So my thing is, we can do it as adults, but being very careful, very sensitive, that we don't push them away, that we understand their voices being heard, that they're important, and then not saying we would mess the work up that Carmen and Kent are doing, because I am quite sure from where they're at now, it took some time and some work to get from where they were to where they are now and where they're going.
So I agree with the idea of a meeting, but I also think having a seat, it's an ex officio, where they essentially have everything but voting rights on the board, would be also good. I think both are sort of good things for us to engage in. And the meeting, really, they as Carmen and Kent mentioned, this is a youth-driven thing. They're their own leaders. They manage their meetings. They manage these things. We could just come at their invitation whenever they want us to come. We're willing to come. And they can determine the topics. They can figure out sort of what that looks like for us, but we're happy to come at their request, I think might be the way to say it. But I do think an ex officio seat, and maybe somebody comes and does it and really likes it and then applies when there's an opening on the board, and we have a young person on the board. I don't think that's out of the question, or a younger person on the board. Yeah, Marcia.
Lots of teens have very full, busy lives, and if their academics take up a lot of time, or sports, or some other activity, music, or whatever, being able to hold a spot on a board, in addition to being part of their youth council, their schedules get pretty tight. So I wouldn't want this serving on for them to serve on the Parks Board to become a burden. I think we would gain a lot from having a youth voice. But I wouldn't want it to be a burden. Having a representative come, if we could have a statement, an address. The board hears from an address made from the youth council annually, that they come up with topics or bullet points that they think are really important that the Parks Board be aware of. And that would be an activity that they would have to do together. So that's might be another good thing, the way to have input from the youth population.
And last thing is that they're also, Brad, they're coming back. If they might not have no voting power, but they can go back to their teams and say, this is what the Raleigh Greenway is talking about, and they can be an advocate for that group. Now again, we got to get away from what we think as adults. I'm just being honest with all adults, because they don't have to have no voting right, but they can sit, because you're at the table don't mean you're eating. And when you do eat, you don't share things with people. Now, but what these teams can do is say, if you want to build leaders and stop blinding folks like that, these teams, the work that Kent and Carmen have done, they can go back to this group and say, this is what the Raleigh Greenway is talking about. When they vote, they're voting on this. Then it goes to city council. What do you guys think? What do I need to go back and tell them how we as a group are feeling? That's when voice is heard. I don't run for governor one day, y'all. Seriously, don't vote for me, but I'm gonna run for governor. I'm just letting y'all know, don't vote for me, because that's how I'm just kidding. But that's why it's critical, guys, that more than ever, these teens' voices got to be heard. And maybe because I'm getting older and I'm understanding that more and I'm being more empathetic, but it's critical that they have someone on there that we are empowering and they lead. And then one day when they get older, they would love to be a part of this Raleigh Greenway committee thing.
All right. So I'm confused as to what we're arguing about exactly.
Ain't no argument, Brad. It's just, I mean.
Well, I know, but you're sort of yelling at everybody, and we're sort of in agreement that getting folks more involved is good, but we've had a couple of proposals on the table about how we want to proceed with that. And what I hear you saying is that you think somebody should be at the table and be part of our conversations. There's also this thought that we might go join the Raleigh Youth Council for a meeting if they wanted us to come, we'd be open to that. But of course, it's their driven thing. So if they don't want us to come hang out, then that's that. But I don't know what how we would like to proceed as a group. So I'm hearing different things. I'm hearing some people sort of express skepticism of the liaison. I'm hearing other people, but Carmen and Ken proposed a liaison, so that's what I'm.
Yeah, I just want us to be cautious around a person. Like I say, I don't want us to have a token team. That is not what I think we should be looking for. And Giovanna, is there what policies are out there for us that may hinder what we're trying to do, and what policies do we need to put in place for us to clear the path to have teams participate in some capacity?
Yeah, and I'll just say it's not an action item on our agenda. So nope. I don't think we have to do anything except listen and say, yeah, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah. So I just want to know what are the things out there that when it does become an action item, what we need to be thinking about. Yeah. That's all.
And
if I can interject real quick on that one, Mr. Herbert, is I guess there's an age requirement to actually serve on a board. So right now it would be a non-voting ex officio, role, which would be the liaison. So it would require an ordinance change to be able to allow for an individual of a certain age to be able to serve on a board in a voting role. So we can always look into that if you'd like us to see what that would require. But I think initially, maybe the first step, it is engaging with RYC, having a liaison. And this person, the RYC liaison, can be as active as you all want them to be. You can engage them as much as you can in the meetings. They just don't have a voting. You can give them homework items. You can give them, input items as much as you want. But I think, if Carmen and Kent can go back, work internally with RYC, see if they can identify that liaison to start coming to the meetings. And then I think with Brad and you all's support, start working up ways to better engage that individual and also engage the entire group as well. Because I think there's plenty of opportunities there for the entire Park Recreation Greenways Advisory Board and the Youth Council to meet more often than just once a year. So I think if you allow us to go back and identify an individual, I think that'll at least be a path moving forward to better engagement and coordination between the two groups.
Dr. Love, I'm really sorry.
Be a single individual. I heard what Dexter was saying. There are 8 members on their council, if I understand that correctly, so that it could be more than one person, so that they could rotate. It wouldn't be a hardship for them to come to a meeting. They just determine which one is coming, so that they would know when we're meeting, and rotate it so that one student wouldn't feel like they were being overburdened by that.
Sort of related to that, I think one of the things is we're working on our work plan, and that's in front of us. And I don't want to come to the meeting next month and have a youth there without them having some lengthy time to discuss with Kent and Carmen kind of what it is we're looking at. To be perfectly honest, some of our meetings can be kind of tedious and not the most interesting things. So it would be really important that a youth member had an opportunity to look at the big picture of what we're looking at and get involved in something that really interested them and other youth, rather than just having sort of a resume check kind of thing of sitting on being a liaison to the Parks and Rec Board. I think we want to be sure that the opportunity that they have is something that is meaningful engagement, whether it's a master plan and they bring their input in, but just having a liaison and then we feel good, oh gosh, we've got a youth liaison, that worries me some, because our meetings can be kind of tedious.
Well, I think there's got to be a strategic plan in place with that. But even the Jennifer thing, the one on the agenda, but we'll spend 25 minutes talking about Gregory Poole for this last meeting and this meeting. So I want to make sure that we're clear about that too. So let's not get that twisted. That our last meeting, we heard from about 15 people in a day. We heard about from 10 people about.
What are we talking about here again? What are we talking about?
What I'm saying is this right here is important what we're talking about. So let's not be twisted saying.
I don't want to. So a couple things. I don't want to project onto young people that they don't care.
Okay,
I mean, and there's a lot of tedious stuff that I don't want to talk about either, but we have to talk about it because it's our job as an oversight board to talk about it, and it's an important thing to understand.
Right. Well,
and that's part of understanding how this system works.
Okay. Well,
I think that what we have to because we have to stay on track tonight. Our goal tonight is to figure out, we want to increase our engagement with them. I think what I've heard particularly from Dr. Love is we want them to define what that means, like the best to them. Does that mean that they have a different person each month? We want them at our meetings. We're more than welcome to have them at our meetings. If they have somebody who wants to be a liaison permanently to the board, and they feel like they can contribute as a member of the board and they want to go through the tedious stuff and understand what that looks like, great. If
all I said was like what Bell just said, be strategic. That is fine. What I'm saying is we got to stay on track. But damn, if I'm willing to wait to see and talk about 15 people in the last 2 meetings, talk about Gregory Poole. That's what I'm saying too.
I don't understand what your point is.
They figure it out. You grown, figure it out.
May I make a suggestion? Is if there's maybe a possibility of creating an ad hoc committee to maybe kind of create a pathway moving forward for the Raleigh Youth Council involvement in Park Board.
It's just more meetings for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why it has to be that complicated. Can we just say, sounds great, we're into it. You guys tell us how you want to do it.
I was going to say, why don't we let them go back and have a discussion and then come back to us? And then we can move on.
Yeah,
we
like
can go ahead and do is
I think we're willing. I don't want to presume that they're too busy. I don't want to presume that they don't care. I don't want to presume any of that stuff. I want to say that we want them to be involved with us. They tell us how they
Kent
want
and
to do it.
Carmen know the teens the best, and so they can go ahead and work with them, get some feedback, set up a framework, and then we can go ahead and maybe come back with a path moving forward if that
Sounds
works.
great. Sounds perfect to me.
Okay, we'll go ahead and do that then.
Cool.
Great.
All right,
Thanks,
Kent.
Thank you, Kent and Carmen.
Carmen, thank you.
Thank y'all.
Thanks for coming. We really appreciate your work. Really excited at all the stuff you do. We're always amazed at the sneaky stuff that we learn about.
Good job, Carmen and Kent.
Thanks.
Thank you guys for having us.
All right, we have a update about a Horseshoe Farm management plan.
Yes, sir. We have Brian Smith, who's our natural resources superintendent, with us this evening, who's going to provide a presentation on Horseshoe Farm Nature Preserve, highlighting some of the current work being done out there, including both challenges and opportunities that we do have. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to Brian.
Wonderful. Thank you, Oscar. Everybody hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, we have a back to nature opportunity after our the rest of our conversations. So I'll get you guys back to nature. I think one of the things that we've had during COVID is a realization that there's a lot of people out there who are taking advantage of the natural resources that the Parks, Rec, and Cultural Resources system has to offer, and has increased the amount. Over this time last year, I've been using our sites, and it's been really nice. Today, we're going to focus on what it is that we do to manage some of those natural resources, and particularly at Horseshoe Farm Nature Preserve. And I should say that this is focused on this particular site, but next time we join you guys a month from now, we've got from your, I think, last year's work plan, there's two topics that a lot of collaborative work that goes on between natural resources section that I represent and the Parks Division does collaboratively that we'll be talking to you about in more detail. So what I wanted to do tonight is give you a little bit of context just of who we are in the natural resources section, talk about nature preserves in general, and then focus on Horseshoe Farm itself, some of the management that's been going on out there and next steps, and leave some time for question and answer. So this is who we are in terms of a section going across the city. We have two different programs within natural resources, one being outdoor recreation, which is a little bit more of the activated activities like mountain biking, paddling. So you have locations.
Brian,
may I enter? We're not seeing your screen.
Okay.
There you go. Thank you.
Thanks, Oscar. All right, so the programs I'm talking about here stretch from Falls Lake down to Lake Wheeler. So your more activated things in our outdoor rec program here at Forest Ridge Park, Lake Wheeler Park, Lake Johnson, and then our nature preserves at Anna Louise Wilkerson, at Durant Nature Preserve, and one we're going to focus on more tonight at Horseshoe Farm. And we do also have half of Lake Johnson was designated as a nature preserve in the initial process that went on that you can see from the report that I wanted to at least put up here to give you some context that council requested back in 2011, a designation essentially for nature preserve. So they established a definition and criteria and announced those initial sites at that time. And as part of that, asked for management plans to protect the resources that help meet the criteria in the first place. So such that the things that made the sites interesting enough and important enough to be nature preserves will be protected in perpetuity. So that is what the initial definition and criteria did in establishing the first 4 sites that we just looked at on the previous slide. The one we're going to focus on tonight is Horseshoe Farm, and look at what we did in the days. This is certainly prior to when I joined. I've been with the department just about 4 years now, and the site itself was, I think, opened in about 2015. The planning was long before that, and one of the things that kicked that off was this, what we lovingly refer to as the WhatsApp report, and that's Wildlife Habitat Zones Action Team came up with a report that really did a good job of helping us understand what was on the ground. And this area that you can see in pink here around the floodplain of Horseshoe Farm is a significant habitat, a significant natural heritage area, and important to the entire floodplain of the Neuse River. But it was one of the things that shaped how we developed the park amongst some of the other habitat that's there. And included over here what the original master plan was to look like, included a paved area down through that floodplain for access to the river, and have the parking sort of situated out here in the middle of the field. And council went through a process and actually asked for a revision to that, and the plan was reconsidered and redrawn. And what we have on the ground today is more reflective of what came out in 2009, which is about the time that this first report came out as well. And then from that initial data that we had of the natural resource value of what was on the ground and other data that had been collected during the planning process, there was an even larger report provided from the consultant team that we were able to use to turn into an interim management plan for how we would actually be managing the natural resource assets on the ground to the benefit of the park. So what you see out here in the 2009 planning document turned into what we now have on the ground, and that's a whole bunch of nice assets that the community is enjoying. And the site was developed in a very sustainable way and received a Sustainable Sites Initiative award for that in 2015. I think Lisa Schiffbauer is on the call and was project manager on this, was a big piece of making that happen. A lot of that had to do with some of the elements of the park, and in some ways elements that not at the park, such as we didn't bring in sewer and additional utilities. We put in composting toilets there. There's permeable pavement. There's a solar panel that runs the gate that is there. All of those elements sort of combined to go into what ended up as a Sustainable Sites Initiative award for Horseshoe Farm Nature Preserve. A great thing for us to kick it off with. And some of the elements that we kept were the original farmhouse that's there. It had an addition to it that was taken down, but the rest of the building was stabilized. And one of the things that's recently been done is an addition of some exhibits in that building that we're looking forward to being able to show off to the public once we get out of the COVID phase. And we've also put trail on the ground to be able to get into and interpret some of the things in the floodplain, which has been a great asset for folks. Been able to designate some specific types of habitat out there, including monarch way station is one designation for the pollinators that are using the habitat that's been worked on in the fields that we'll talk about more here in a second. Also a U.S. Fish and Wildlife pollinator designation out there. A lot of what's been able to drive that and make it happen is the continued coordination and collaboration between the units across the department. So Parks Division has responsibility for the maintenance of the park, but they do a lot more than that. And the Natural Resources section within the Resources Division, we collaborate extensively with parks. So we're coming up with the plans and how we want to manage the site, but the delivery of a lot of the things on the ground, we depend on the Parks Division to either bring labor in volunteers. Volunteers have removed, at this point, they've spent about 1,500 hours either helping maintain some of the native plantings out there, to doing invasive species removal. So 1,500 hours from just about 600 people has helped take 8 tons of different invasive species off of the property, which is a tremendous move forward. and some of the things that were suggested in the original reports that we of the presentation. So these are some of the things that are on the ground and what's happened since the park was designated. The other things that we're doing, as I mentioned, is to try to transition what these fields have been. Up in the upper left-hand corner here are essentially pasture and turf grass. So they're in fescue and Bermuda grass, and that doesn't offer the habitat value to things like pollinators and birds and other things that would use the cover of these fields that you would get out of some of the more native plants. And one of the ways that you begin to do that transition is by managing these fields a little bit differently. Instead of mowing them on, every 2 weeks, like we do a lot of the areas that we have across parks, we're now managing these where they're mowed once every couple of years. And we do that differently depending on the specific section. So if you look at this one was mowed, very recently, like a year ago. This has got 2 years of growth, and this has got about 3 years of growth on it, which provides different stages of habitat that various things can use. And we've been doing that now since 2013. That interim management plan was put in place based on the documentation that we had. That's what that was one of the basic things that was able to be done, in addition to some of the native plantings of native species that were done here around the areas that were built out. The fields themselves were put on this mowing rotation to give a different habitat character and offer more to a wider variety of species. One of the challenges that you have when you do that is that Mother Nature doesn't read textbooks, and there's a lot of art involved in science as well. So you often have to deal with things that as it goes along, you've got to adapt to how the ground is reacting and what nature is giving you. So what I'm pointing to in 2017, this 2017 aerial photo, or these are areas of trees that were growing in. And what we wanted to be able to do, and what was suggested in these reports that we worked with a lot of partners, both internal and external, to generate, was to keep these in more grasses and wildflowers and not have it go back to trees. And that's what was starting to happen, over here. And the initial 3-year rotation of mowing this was not frequent enough to be able to keep these trees out. So we started to increase the frequency at which we were mowing those just in the last cycle. And this front area here was cut in 2018, but then very quickly returned to this stage with trees back on it. Last year, as we went into the fall, the decision was made to go ahead and try to cut it again. And when they went out to do that, they're able to get the lower field cut, which are out of this view. I'll show you on another slide. They're able to get that cut, but when they had an equipment issue and weren't able to actually get this field cut. And by the time they had the equipment issue dealt with and were able to think about coming back into it, we were in COVID at that point. So it slowed them down and presented a situation that folks in July, when you would normally not do this, the best practice is to make these cuts in the winter when the growing season is stopped. So they had an opportunity in July because they had to come out and deal with a tree that's out here. Urban Forestry was going to take down a tree that was going to come down and be on the fence and or potentially on a neighbor's house. They needed to get a lane into this field. They worked with public utilities as well as calling our staff and asked about whether or not they should go ahead and cut the rest of the vegetation in the field. And the decision was made at that point that yes, in order to keep the field and the rotation that it's in, even though it's not in the prime season to do it, where best management practice would tell us to, let's go ahead and do it so that we get it back on the appropriate rotation and don't get us to a place where we can't get these trees in. So they went ahead and did that cut, which caused some concern from the neighbors, and rightly so. So we've got things that we're doing going forward, and wanted to give you guys an update on where we are with this being the interim management plan. What we'll eventually do is look back at the documents, or we are looking back at the documents to make a more finalized plan. I wanted to show you at least the logic that people go through in these types of decision-making processes. And one of the documents that was pointed to from the beginning, and both of the larger things that you saw at the beginning, was this native warm season grasses in the Mid-South. And there's a bunch of different ways that you can go about managing these areas. And in our case, what we're trying to manage for is wildlife habitat. So you look at what your pre-existing conditions are. We have a cool season hay pasture. And there's a bunch of different things that you can do to take that from a pasture and turn it into a more diverse piece of habitat. And this is a picture just from a few weeks ago of what exists at a Horseshoe Farm right next to the area that was cut right now. So there's already been great transition in these fields. What we need to do now is figure out what we're going to do to enhance that and keep this transition going in future years. And that's what we're in the process of doing. So in this fall cycle, now that we've been able to fill a position that had been frozen for a bit, but is now was opened and we were able to fill it, we now have a land stewardship program manager back on board. And his name is Sean Goff. He comes to us from state parks where he's done a lot of management plans and implemented a lot of this kind of stuff in places across the state. We'll be able to work with our colleagues in parks and across the department to figure out exactly what the next steps look like for the site. And most immediately, we're working with the neighbors to get out and do some outreach and have discussions about what management is going to be done on the site as we move forward, but also do some plantings this fall, especially in the area up here, to get to a couple of additional pieces that were mentioned in those original reports that we did with a broad group of stakeholders. Some of those things are planting some tree islands out here of tree species that are of a little bit higher habitat value and ones that we actually want to stay there longer term, ones that are fire tolerant. We go back, one of the tools that's used in managing an area like this is actually prescribed fire and doing controlled burns. So what we'll plant out here are some tree islands of shortleaf pine and longleaf pine and turn this into an area that those tree islands will persist long term. And we'll also look back at this flow chart. We can take some agricultural equipment like a disc to turn over soil and go out there and make a perimeter around this field so that we know as we move forward, that'll give us some information as to how the field reacts when we do that. We'll do it once in the fall, once in the spring, and we'll plant it. And it'll give us a nice, when we plant it with a combination of warm season grasses and flowers, it'll be beautiful aesthetically, but it's as important or more importantly, giving us an idea of how this field is going to react when we use a tool like that. So that when we go about the process of actually finalizing the management plan for Horseshoe Farm, we'll have additional information for what it is that this ground is actually going to react in when we provide those types of interventions. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is provide habitat, but also we're trying to provide an experience for people. So that's what the end goal is, and we're in the process of learning exactly what this piece of ground is going to look like, and working with neighbors and our colleagues across the department to make that happen. So that is a very quick run through of what's going on at Horseshoe Farm. Happy to take questions, but also say that we've got, as I said, an opportunity to be with you again at the coming meeting, and myself and folks from Parks Division will be able to give you a little bit broader picture than just Horseshoe Farm as to what we're doing more across the system. So I'll leave it there and happy to take any questions if anybody has them.
Yep, Claude.
Yeah, Brian, thank you very much for the presentation. That was very illuminating. I have a two-part question, if you don't mind. You mentioned that there was a definition created for nature preserves. Do you have that handy on what that exact verbiage is?
It's a long definition, frankly. It's an entire paragraph. So off the top of my head, I don't, but I'm happy to provide that to the board so that you guys have got you've got it. The essential
items. That would be
items.
wonderful. Yeah, if you could share that with your data.
Yep, absolutely. And the essential pieces of it were we're looking for parks that essentially were characteristic of and exemplary of natural areas that were relatively, had species left on them, had features left on them that were great representations of, more natural areas in the Piedmont region. And, even though Horseshoe Farm in the center of it was farmed for years, that entire floodplain has some incredibly important resources in it. So it's things like that, types of species that from a natural heritage perspective, we don't have many of left. So that's really what the definition centers around, but I can get you the specific text so that you've got it.
Wonderful, thank you. And if I may just, one more, you talked about the field and the mowing. From what I understood from the neighbor reports was that not only was the mowing conducted, as you mentioned, and everyone was aware, outside of the normally scheduled time, but it was done in a circular fashion from the outside in, so that none of the animals inside the field had a chance to escape, and they were basically all just mown to pieces. Do you know what happened there, and how are we going to prevent that going forward?
Sure, good question. I think the mowing was actually done over 2 days, but yes, there was at least a portion of it, not that I was out there, but from what I've been told, there was a portion of it that was done in that circular type of fashion, which certainly is not the way that we would want it to happen. We've got opportunity with I think the communication that we've got set up now with the folks that are engaged in the process and with Sean Goff that I mentioned being on board, to be able to set up a series of meetings that we're going to do at least twice a year, but those stakeholders will be communicating, I think, on a more frequent basis, even that, where we discuss, okay, here are the parks that are going to have some sort of natural resources management done over the next 6-month period. This is what that management is going to look like and how it should be implemented. We have the opportunity to be talking those things through in more detail than we have in the past. So this is one of those teachable moments that's allowing us to look at what our internal processes are and figure out how we can do it more effectively going forward so that we don't end up.
That sounds good. And if I'm sorry, I won't take all the time. Just one, do we know, was that just that the person was unaware, the person doing the mowing, they were unaware that they were trapping the animals, or it was a communication problem, or do we know exactly where the crux of the issue was there?
I don't. If that on that particular tractor on that day, I know that we had an employee that was relatively new to us, and some of the folks that employee, but not new to the city, and some of the folks that that person had worked with in the past were in public utilities, so they weren't necessarily the normal parks maintenance crews that would be out there doing the mowing. So it's possible that that person doesn't have that level of experience. So I think the same type of experience. They have experience with the equipment certainly and know what they're doing in the mowing, but may not necessarily have the natural resources. So there is sort of a perfect combination of things going on there that are odd. We haven't had this sort of issue up to this point. We've been very fortunate, and our relationship with our parks maintenance folks has been very strong. So we haven't been put in this type of position before. So it's, like I said, a good opportunity for us to learn and look at what the things are that we have in place. But I think that there's some reasonable thought process that a person from public utilities versus the parks maintenance crews that we're normally working with may just not have understood the type of management.
Okay. Thank you so much. And I would just like to encourage, this is my last night on the board, so I would like to encourage the rest of the board as you go forward talking about these natural management issues. That's and also Brian, and your guys, your staff, to make sure that those communications occur before somebody gets on a tractor and just sweeps through there. And I know after now you probably will, but I just like to emphasize that again, and I appreciate the work you're doing.
Thank you, Claude.
Awesome. Thanks. Marcia, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you so much, Brian. That was very informative. I attended many of those master planning committees for Horseshoe Farm Nature Preserves and remember what a long and arduous and controversial that process was. One of the elements that was suggested for there was to have an art center, and I understand that's been changed, but I'd just like to make a suggestion, because this is such a treasure of a place, that perhaps the arts programming could include hosting plein air painting dates, to invite artists to come out and paint, or wildlife photography workshops, or things like that have to do with nature and art. It might be wonderful to have some of those things happening at that precious place. Thank you.
That's fantastic, and something that we are doing, and really enjoyed a good relationship with the arts crew, and have had a couple of different days, and we'll continue to do that. It's one of the places, or one of the things that I think the farmhouse is really a nice benefit for it, that you can set up in there and use the space as you need it. But as you say, you can then go outside and actually have an open air painting experience in a beautiful landscape. So that idea and philosophy certainly hasn't been lost. And a lot of artists that do make use of the site, and our managers out there, Amy Eckberg, has coordinated a lot with Eliza Kaiser from Arts, and tried to take advantage of the fact that those two things do come together there. Nature and art really do lend themselves to great experiences for people in the natural world. So yes, we're right there with you. Thank you for that, Mark.
Any other questions for Brian? Awesome. Well, Brian, thank you so much for joining us tonight. This is fantastic information. I know that a lot of us care deeply about this work, and really appreciated your attention to with the incident that happened, as well as generally the attention the department pays to these spaces. So thanks.
My pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity, and look forward to speaking with you guys again soon.
Thanks so much. All right. So next up, we have our action item for the work plan. The work plan is the one that I sent around to everyone. Does anybody have any questions about that? That came out of our conversations last time. If there's no discussion, I can entertain a motion.
Is this where it's appropriate to talk about the Fred Fletcher Awards Committee?
Yeah, so let's talk about that.
I think it's really important, having served from the inaugural of that event for the 6 years I was on the Parks Board in the way back past, and having known Fred Fletcher and how dedicated he was to the Parks Board. I really feel like that this should stay in the domain of the Parks Board members being involved with this. I don't think it's something that should be sort of given over to a group of other volunteers.
Oh, no. The volunteer committee on there is the thought that the Fred Fletcher committee would continue to exist through the whole year, in addition to supporting the needs of the event, but then at the times it's not dealing with the event, be able to support the department in its needs to help with volunteer efforts.
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yep. that was it was renaming it from the Fred Fletcher Committee to the Fred Fletcher Volunteer Committee. And if that isn't clear, then we can change the name of that.
Well, thank you for explaining.
Yeah, for sure. Any other questions?
I move to approve the work plan.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Clodagh. You have a comment or question?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say thank you for reorganizing it and getting it in a form that works better, I think, for our purposes. Appreciate all the work that went into that.
Thanks so much, Clodagh. All right, Jennifer, you had a motion?
I did. I was moving to approve it.
Great. Is there a second?
A second.
Great. All those in favor? So we have to do this thing.
Yeah. Oops, there's my hand.
All right. All those opposed? Great. Any abstentions to be recorded? All right. Great. So that will pass along, and our next chair will have the opportunity to present that to council as our work plan moving forward. All right. So we have meeting minutes from the last meeting. Everybody have a chance to look at that. Any thoughts, questions?
I think there might be a slight typo. It says excused abuse. I think it should be Absent and excused.
Good catch. I didn't see that.
I'm a stickler on policies and minutes, so.
Yeah, I have one minor correction also. On page 4, the fourth paragraph where it says Miss Ashcraft asked, there's just an F there. I assume it should say if there would be urban tree committee. She's asking about urban tree committee meetings. So it's just a minor thing, but if we want it to be grammatically correct, all of that. Fourth page, fourth paragraph, it starts with Ms. Ashcraft asked.
Great. So 2 small adjustments. So whomever wants to make a motion, we can include those.
Move that we accept the minutes with the changes made to the recommendations that were made.
Second.
Great. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay. 1 opposed. Is that right? And then
No, sorry, not opposed. I'm in favor.
Millsaps, are you opposed? You're just tardy. All right. All right, cool. All in favor. It's unanimous. It passed. All right. We have the director's report. Oscar.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I know you all already have a copy of the director's report that came in your packet, but I did want to just kind of touch on a couple of highlights from that report. The first one being our partnership with the Carolina Panthers organization for a challenge course at Barwell Road Park. If y'all know that that the Carolina Panthers donated $150,000 towards the creation of a youth challenge course out at Barwell Road Park. And it's kind of basically leveraging some CIP money that we had for Barwell Road Park. So over the next couple of months, there'll be some dirt moving out there along with the playground development. But the Carolina Panthers theme challenge course will be going in over there in cooperation with Carolina Panthers. So I just wanted to say thank you to our team led by Steven and Bentley and his team that made this partnership possible. And so that just really kind of shows the public-private partnership opportunities that are out there. So once it's all said and done, it's going to be a great asset to the community. And so we're really looking forward to that project being completed. The second item I wanted to touch on was at our actually city council meeting on September the 15th, our PRCR department was recognized with the Employee Big Idea Award by council and the city manager's office. And it was basically based on our Play Anywhere initiative that staff put into place in response to COVID-19. So when staff recognized that we had to basically shut down our community centers and a lot of our programs, they still felt the need to serve the community. So staff from different divisions, our marketing group, our recreation group, resources group, and everybody came together to find out ways that they can go ahead and continue to serve the community. So they developed a series of arts and crafts, fitness programs, other things that were virtual for free of charge that we can go ahead and provide the community so they can still kind of stay connected, stay mentally and physically well during the hard times of COVID. So I mean, even they went as far as having a phone-in joke of the day line, which we got a lot of people calling in to hear sometimes cheesy jokes, sometimes great jokes, but it was a great way to kind of keep a smile on everybody's face during COVID. So, so we accepted that Big Idea Award on behalf of all of the departments, and we're very happy that they got recognized by council and the city manager's office on that. So that's really something that we're very proud of. And even to this day, we're continuing to push out some Play Anywhere initiatives until we can at least fully open the rest of our facilities and programs. So I just wanted to say a big thank you to staff and thank you all for your support of us as well. And speaking of park openings, I did send you all a link when we did enter into phase 2.5 of our openings. So it was really a two-tier approach. September the 5th, we kind of basically opened a good chunk of our outdoor amenities, including our playgrounds, which was a big thing, our outdoor basketball courts, our outdoor sand volleyball courts, and then we also opened up our baseball and softball athletic fields for rental and also for our internal youth and adult leagues, simply because both baseball and softball are considered low contact sports. The other high contact sports are going to have to wait till a later phase. And then our phase secondary aspect of phase 2.5 went into effect September 12th, where we went ahead and opened up with reduced capacity some of our community and neighborhood centers, some of our museums and historic sites and art centers. And then we also did allow outdoor rentals, picnic shelter rentals, outdoor special events, and some of those, as long as they can go ahead and meet, stay within the group gathering criteria set forth by the state of North Carolina. And so we are going to stay in phase 2.5 through at least October the 2nd, and that's when we anticipate Governor Cooper coming up with some additional ease of restrictions for us. And so once we do formulate the next phase 3, we will go ahead and let you all know what that will look like, and we will also be posting that information on our website. And then finally, I also like to announce a couple of items as it reports to the makeup of the board. And I may have reported on this last time, but in July, we had 2 reappointments back to our board. Dr. Carol Love and Dave Towns were both reappointed to the board by council. So congratulations on your reappointments. And then also here just recently, there has been 2 appointments to the board. And I think this is to replace our outgoing members, Clodagh and also David. So I wanted to say thank you on behalf of myself for this years of service that y'all have provided to the Park Recreation and Greenway Advisory Board, and really appreciate all the passion and insight you did bring to the board. So I wanted to say thank you on behalf of the Park and Recreation staff for everything that you've done. And so with that, council did make the appointment of 2 new individuals, Christina Jones and Rashawn King. And I'm sure we will be meeting them in an upcoming meeting, but they will be replacing Clodagh and David. And then that is the extent of my report. So I wanted to say thank you all for your support over the last several months, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, Oscar. Any questions for Oscar?
All right, thank you.
Awesome. Cool. All right, so next up, we have our committees didn't meet, obviously. Was there am I breaking up? Okay. I got you're breaking up message. Clodagh, was there an Arts Commission meeting?
Sorry, my mouse was way off on another screen. Yes, there was on Tuesday. Very quick. Actually, the arts are all ablaze. There's all kinds of stuff going on. I'll give you a very quick synopsis. The Pullen Arts Center is coming along really nicely. Should be able to open by the end of this year. The art piece outside of the Duke Center for Performing Arts downtown. If you guys have been by there, check it out. It's up there. The lights. It's a big light art installation. It's wonderful. The slate for the 2020 Medal of Arts is adopted. There's 7 candidates on that of various sources. Anyone who's interested, just ping me and I can let you know the details. The grant program, the arts grant program, is being revised to really help the arts partners out through COVID. And of course, you know, they're really, really hardly hit right now with not having audiences, not being able to perform. So there's a lot of initiative going on there. both in bringing performances online and also easing the process to be able to assist financially as we make the way through this. The Union Station Arts Project, that big arts project, is almost completed also. It's well underway. Go by and check that out. It looks really cool. And then I don't know how many, some of you might have been watching the Downtown Raleigh Alliance annual report today that was on. Our very own Kelly McChesney, who is responsible for public art, got their Downtown Advocate Award. So that's great celebration, and she well deserves it. And that is all except for one final plug. I've had a wonderful time as the liaison for the Arts Commission, and it was more for me than just being that conduit of carrying information. I had a wonderful time. It's a wonderful group of people. So obviously that position is open. I highly recommend it to any of you guys who are interested in the arts and are interested in participating in what Raleigh's doing in the arts.
Thanks, Cleta. Was there a museum advisory board meeting? Jan?
Yes, there was. Let me pull up my notes. So they had their very first meeting August 26th since COVID. And so they had a lot of kind of updates and overviews. So I'll just kind of quickly rattle through them. Mordecai House has a virtual tour of the house and grounds, games, crafts, and activities, kind of piggybacking on what Oscar said earlier. There's a lot of online activities that can be found. They're taking advantage of the shutdown to take care of some needed repairs, both there and at the Tucker House. Unfortunately, the Escape to Freedom event is canceled this year, and they're trying to see if they can reschedule it in the spring if possible. VADA has an interpretive plan committee that's meeting to work on the interpretive signage at the for the project. Moore Square, most events and programming have been canceled since mid-March, but the market is open, and that's every Wednesday from 3 to 6, and that runs through the end of October. It's considered essential because they have food and produce, so that's why that's open. Their 1-year anniversary of being open was on August 3rd, so unfortunately that wasn't as much fanfare as it might have been otherwise. At Mordecai, they were doing some needed utility work, and they came upon some materials that looked interesting, so they kind of stopped and started cataloging it. And there's a lot of interesting archaeological finds that they have found, and they sent out a list of them, which I can share. It's mostly little bits of pottery and tools and different things. So that's sort of interesting. Pullen, shelters and bathrooms are open. The cafe is open but limited. There's been a lot of folks there. They're going to try to do Holiday Express, but in a different format. No, Oscar, is that not happening now?
Well, yeah, the traditional Holiday Express is canceled. I was going to wait until council got the official notification before I notified you all, but staff are going to be working on kind of a virtual type of activity with some self-directed activity. So more details to come on that.
Okay, great. They've had some issues there with folks breaking the rules. Fishing's not allowed at the park. That's the biggie. And people keep fishing, and they tear down the signs that they put up that say no fishing. So outlaws. Chavis, construction is progressing ahead of schedule. Supposed to be done in May of 2021 for the first phase. There's a committee for the Heritage Plaza that we've talked about some on this board, and they've chosen a firm to work on the Heritage Plaza. Museums have had to pivot to provide education in different ways because of no school visits. They have lots of digital resources now. Let's see. Council, this is a biggie, has asked staff to investigate if the Historic Cemeteries and the Historic Resources Museums Advisory Board should merge if they have a synergy, and it would make more sense for them to be one committee, one board rather than two. So the two boards are taking it on themselves to create ad hoc subcommittees to study that and come up with some recommendations on whether or not they think that does make sense, or if they really have different roles, and if it doesn't make that much sense to do so, and they'll need to report back to council. I've volunteered to be an ex officio member of that ad hoc committee, just so I can kind of stay in the loop as to what's going on there and report back. That's it. Those are the highlights.
Great. Thanks, Jennifer. Two things then for me. I've got two committees to report on tonight. One is the leadership committee for Dix, who had their first meeting, I think, before our last meeting or not. I don't remember when it was. It feels like a long time ago. Anyway, the first meeting setting things up. They're getting things going with the Lake Wheeler Road project. And so there's actually a few surveys out about that, asking sort of what folks want from that corridor, because there's a planning project going on next to the park. It's not actually coordinated by the park, it's coordinated by the planning department. The next one of those is next Tuesday. The community committee, I believe, has started meeting. I don't know that we have anybody on the board right now who's in that. We might eventually want to look at a liaison for that. So that's that. The other news is this is the end of the nomination committee for this year. And I can report the results of the election. Jennifer will be the new chair, and Beverly will be the new vice chair. So congratulations to you both. It's a tight race for Jennifer's seat.
I thought there might be a write-in candidate. Wasn't sure.
Yeah, but yeah. So we're excited. I'm excited to continue working with both of you. And so those folks will be seated at the next meeting. That makes this my last meeting. So now I get to be
not last meeting, just last chair, right?
Last is chair. Now I get to be
chair.
Now I get to be contrarian.
Wait, you haven't been contrarian?
All right. All right. So we have some updates, some project updates before we get to board comments. First, from TJ, we have an update about P5. Hey, TJ, thanks for hanging out with us.
Hey, everybody. Good to see you all. Since we are already after 8 o'clock, I will try to be as quick as possible with this one. All right. So yeah, I'm going to present tonight a quick project update on where we're at with the public participation policy. So this was on your work plan last year. The last time that the board saw this item was back in January. You all reviewed the policy draft we had put together. We then tabled this work plan item so that you all could switch your focus over to the Parks Bond, prepping for that 2020 Parks Bond. And then, of course, COVID-19 came along. All of our project schedules got pushed back a bit. But we are looking to resume our work on this P5 work plan item now. The major event that's taken place in the interim is the city planning department developed a public participation playbook. Now, if you'll remember from our P5 work, one of the things that we had left to do was look at the staff manual, the kind of nuts and bolts for how we decide what meeting types to do, facilitation methods, that sort of thing. This public participation playbook that's been developed by city planning, it was just endorsed by city council last month, is really going to step in and play that role of our staff manual. And it has the advantage of being a citywide document. So this will apply for the Parks Department, the Planning Department, the Transportation Department, public utilities, anybody going out there and doing public engagement efforts can use this playbook. And it's going to serve that same purpose that we used to have on our own, the PRCR staff manual. So the work that we're going to want to do with you all over the next month or two is go back, take a second look at the revised policy that we had put together earlier this year, make some tweaks to it to bring it more in line with what's in the playbook. And ultimately what we're shooting to do here is incorporate more flexibility, in our approval process, in our review process, expedite the planning work that we do, and really respond to the direction that city councils set for us and for a lot of departments to improve the efficiency of our project delivery. And we think that the playbook that we have now is going to go a long way to helping us do that, along with the kind of the policy pieces in that policy update. So again, since we're short on time, I won't go into much detail, but essentially the playbook is just, like I mentioned, a how-to guide. It's going to be a resource, a manual, a toolkit for staff to look at as we're putting together public engagement efforts. It's in your packet tonight, and so you can flip through. It's broken down into 4 sections. First of all is just the kind of basic legal requirements, accessibility and public notice for meetings, all of those sorts of things. The second section goes into engagement planning. This will be familiar to any of you that have seen a situation assessment that we do before a park master plan, right? It's just making sure that we do all of our homework, all of our background research, identify stakeholders, decide what the decision-making process is going to be, who's going to be involved, what the role of the public is going to be. It also has a lot of good stuff on implementation. So once we've got our engagement plan in place, now how are we actually implementing and facilitating those meetings? How are we designing our surveys? That's what the implementation chapter gets at. And then importantly, there's a good section on documentation and reporting that I do just want to take 1 second to look at, because I think this is going to have some great implications for improving a lot of our processes. It really puts a lot of additional emphasis on the importance of communicating, excuse me, communicating the results of our public process to close that feedback loop, so that we're not just asking citizens to show up and give us their input, but we're also following up with them to let them know exactly how that input shaped the decision-making process. And it's also a way to hold us accountable, right? This playbook asks us to set performance measures when we go into our processes for the number of people we want to engage with, the demographics that we want to hit. And this reporting process helps us reflect on those performance measures and actually sees if we were successful. So one of the things is that it helps us focus on the outcomes rather than just the inputs, right? I think in our old way of thinking, we would have been focusing on the inputs, something like the minimum required number of public meetings, without, sometimes 1 or 2 people show up to those, but we would say, well, we did the meeting, we did what we needed to do. Here in this new way of looking at it, we're going to be focusing more on the outcomes. Like I mentioned, we're going to be thinking about, did we hit the number of people we wanted? Did we hit the demographic targets that we had set for ourselves? And so I think that's going to go a long way to making sure that the engagement that we're doing is effective. Just a few bullets to run through. To put all your minds at ease, this is also based on that International Association for Public Participation, the IAP2 principles that our policy has been based on for years. So it's nothing really groundbreaking. It's no huge shifts. But it's more tweaking things to make sure, again, that our project managers can be more innovative, more creative in our engagement, and that we can be more flexible to tailor exactly how we want to model any of our processes for each unique project in the community that we're working in. It's also going to establish for us, again, because it's a citywide document that's going to apply to all departments, we're going to make sure that we're consistent in how we're talking about things. So we're going to be updating terminology to make sure everything's modernized. And also it's going to give us a chance to make things more accessible to citizens, right? Whether you show up for a planning meeting for transportation, doing a road widening project, or for parks doing a master plan, it's going to have a similar look and feel. You're going to know what to expect. It's going to be a lot more predictable. And hopefully that helps to start to bring down some barriers to engagement that we've seen. I do also want to note that some of you might be familiar or have heard of some of the work going on that the city is doing with Mickey Fern on his community engagement study. So that is kind of a parallel process. I think the best way to think about it is that our policy and then this playbook we're going to be working on incorporating is really project focused. So it's to help us do individual kind of outreach for a specific project, whereas Mickey Fern's work is more of kind of a broader, more holistic look at the city's culture and our values around public engagement. Of course, we're reinforcing all those same values of transparency and inclusion and valuing people's time and the input that citizens give when they dedicate time to work with us. So it's all supporting each other, but those are 2 separate processes. So what does this mean for you all coming up next? What we're asking you to do tonight is to direct our work to shift over to the Parks Committee. We'll be doing some internal staff training work in the last week of September, first week of October. We're going to be using the Dix Park Edge study as kind of a case study to apply, look at how we might apply the public playbook, the participation playbook to that process. So that's going to be a really exciting collaboration between us and city planning, since that That's a project that really crosses departmental boundaries. Once we get done with that training, we would propose engaging with the Parks Committee on 1 or 2 virtual meetings where we could dive into the playbook in a little bit more detail and talk through, again, some of those more specificities on the changes that we'll need to make to our policy, just to make sure everything is synced up, better aligned. And then ultimately, we'll bring back our recommendations to the board in November, the revisions to the policy to get your endorsement from there. I'll wrap up there, but if there are any questions, of course, I'm happy to answer.
Good work, DJ. Any questions? Cool. And I think it does highlight the fact that we probably need to reiterate who our committees are, which is probably something we should do around this time anyway. And so I think that'll be something that maybe as a on my way out thing, I'll help Jennifer and Beverly with what we have already. And I'm guessing they will probably reach out to you to clarify who's on what before they start looking for times for you to meet in October for the Parks Committee, for example.
That sounds good.
Cool. Thanks, DJ.
Thank you,
Thanks,
TJ.
everyone.
Great. We have a project update for the Trenton Road sidewalk and Crabtree Creek improvements around Lassiter Mill.
Yes, sir. We have David Bender, who's our capital projects manager, is going to give updates on those 2 projects.
Great. Thanks so much.
Hey, good evening. Sorry about that. I'm David Bender. I'm a capital projects manager with the Planning Development Communications Division, and we work exclusively on the greenways. And what I'm like to do is I'm going to give you an update on the Trenton Road sidewalk project and the Crabtree Creek improvements at Lassiter Mill. And does everybody see my first slide?
Not yet.
No slides yet.
Let me share again.
There you go, David. You're on.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So if you look at the first slide, you'll get a sense of where these, if you're not familiar with these projects are, you'll see Trenton Road is over on the southern end of Umstead Park near the I-40 interchange, and Lassiter Mill over here, over by Root Elementary School and St. David School, and right at the Crabtree Creek. So the Trenton Road project was initially set up by, or it was promoted by the community that was out there, and they requested to have a project, some type of improved safe access to be included in the 2014 bond. And that was a $1 million budget was established, and that funding was really only to support some type of side path from the bridge to the state of Umstead State Park, but it didn't include any improvements over I-40. This project does provide access to the existing Greenway system, the Reedy Creek Trail, and Umstead State Park, and it would serve as a connection for the adjacent community to get to Umstead State Park. And most importantly, it answered community concerns. They were concerned about the increased traffic that was creating safety hazards for those that were walking along the paths or the goat paths. This road is a NCDOT road, and the areas surrounding Trenton Road, they're some are in the city, but primarily the locations are in the county. So looking at this slide, you'll see existing conditions. This is looking on Trenton Road, looking south towards I-40 overpass. You'll see on the right, there is an existing 5-foot asphalt sidewalk. That was constructed as part of the adjacent residential community. And coordinating this project with NCDOT, they were actually not familiar with this installation. So it was a surprise to them, and that was simply because of the clearing. There wasn't any ditch line or any barrier between the travel lane and the sidewalk. Now looking in the north direction, this is looking towards Umstead State Park, and Silent Stream Court is just over to the right. Our project is going to be located where you see on the left along this side of the road. Important for you to notice is that there is a tremendous amount of vegetation that is located along this right of way. Most of this vegetation is located in the right of way, so that is an issue that we're trying to pay close attention to through the design. So that we contacted with SEPI Engineering to put together a feasibility study, and we asked them to look at 3 alternatives, and they were 5-foot sidewalk, an 8-foot side path, and a 10-foot side path, both with a ditch and curb section applied to it. When we initiated and conducted the feasibility study, we wanted to make sure of a couple factors were included. One, we want to make sure that there was minimal property acquisition and minimal, if any, temporary construction easement. We wanted the facility to be safe for users. We wanted them to have a quality user experience. We wanted it to keep that that rural experience. We wanted it to be permittable. And again, respect the natural environment, and also be able to work through the challenges of the utilities, and also be within a realistic construction budget, because we did have a minimum budget of $1 million that was set up for this project. So throughout the final recommendation, staff making a recommendation, and because of the budget, we decided to go with the 5-foot sidewalk, and that would be located along the west side of Trenton Road, where you see the arrow. And it's also going to be located behind the ditch, so it's going to maintain the existing cross-section. And of course, when we had the open house back in the last bond open houses we were having, we had met with quite a few of the property owners. It gave us an opportunity to introduce these options with them, and they were unanimously in support of the 5-foot sidewalk. So they were very excited about this as an option for us to move forward with. Of course, it does fit within our current budget, and most importantly, we coordinated through this process with our transportation department, and with NCDOT, and with the town of Cary. So they are all involved in that process. So this is the recommendation that we are currently in design with another consultant, and that project is anticipated to be completed in spring 2022. Any questions before I move on?
Great.
So the second project, Lassiter Mill, this also is a 2014 park bond. It was set up as a $2 million budget. This was going to provide a connection with Crabtree Creek where there are currently connectivity problems. We also wanted to address an existing at-grade crossing and how to improve access across the existing Lassiter Mill Bridge. And how do we bring in the Lassiter Mill Historic Park to be integrated into this system? So, from Lassiter Mill on the east boundary, and over here towards the end of Hertford Street is the western boundary. The first section A was going to address improved cross-section on Lassiter Mill Bridge, a grade separation loop that would actually travel under Lassiter Mill Bridge and then tie into the existing Crabtree Creek. We would retain the existing at-grade separation. Section B was a connection from Hereford Street behind Root Elementary and bringing in the historic park, which then tied into Lassiter Mill. And this eliminated the on-road traffic lane, and then also there's a small path that ties in and then a sidewalk. So this was creating a more improved connection. Section C is, which I imagine a lot of you are familiar with, is where the pavement comes to an end, and it's a dirt path followed by a elevated timber boardwalk and then an old set of steps that brings you up to Hereford Street. We're going to pave this section, and then we are creating an elevated boardwalk that's going to tie much quicker to Hereford Street, and then we will provide sidewalk improvements up to the existing sidewalk. Sorry. So here you see the Section A, Lassiter Mill Bridge. It's a narrow concrete sidewalk. We would be looking at, the project was to expand this to a 10-foot length. You'd also want to provide improvements along the crossing here. And it would also require acquisition of some property over here where we currently have some utility lines. This project scope was estimated to be just under $619,000. Section B, which was the route that followed underneath behind Root Elementary, that project turned out to be much more complicated than what we had anticipated, as well as expensive. It was going to require elevated timber boardwalk all the way along the slope tying into Lassiter Mill. It was going to require retaining walls, sidewalk improvements, easement acquisitions with AT&T, Duke Energy. It was tied. There were tree conservation easements that were areas that were surrounding the location. So that project came in at a cost estimate of just over $1 million. We made the decision to stop the design of that project simply because it was the cost of it and the complexity of trying to get easements for this project was going to be more challenging, and it was going to take away from what we thought was priority, which is Section C, which is tying in this dirt path into a paved section and then tying into Hereford Street. And this would entail some stream bank stabilization, section of elevated timber boardwalk. And this project came in at just under $1 million. So the staff evaluated these final estimates from our consultant, and the total of the three sections came out to be about $2.6 million. Clearly, it was exceeding our current $2 million budget. And when you take away professional services, that reduces our actual budget down below $2 million. So we wanted to get the most out of what we could in this project. We determined that Section C is a priority improvement. That was just under $1 million. And we wanted to provide at-grade crossing improvements at that existing crossing. We would try to get rectangular rapid flashing beacons or a hawk, something that we could improve that crossing. And then we would also do some restriping on the bridge, as well as other sidewalk enhancements. And we estimated that around $100,000. So leaving that project to be under our current budget, we felt that was the best approach in order for us to get the most out of our current budget and also to accomplish the most for our project. So I tried to be the quickest one tonight. So any questions or anything, I'd be happy to answer.
Great. Thanks so much, David. Questions? Beverly, is that a question?
Yeah, question or just kudos that Section C of all of those, is the most important. Keeping an at-grade crossing on the Section A is going to minimize some of the value of the under the bridge component, but the washed out part there on Section C is critical. The missing piece on that, since you won't be doing Section B, and I agree that's costly and not the highest priority, but there will need to be signage. There has needed to be signage on that length of the Greenway for decades, and I hope that you can include that signage as part of that project.
You brought up an important aspect of these projects. We're trying to improve all of the wayfinding for all of these projects as we go into construction, simply for it is a challenge to get through a couple of these connections, and this will certainly improve it. So I appreciate your comment.
A few people have heard me say those little flag wayfinding signs. I won't use the word that I think of them, but you need a map, context map that shows somebody what roads to follow to connect to the next part of the Greenway. Please don't use those. Waste your money on those little flags. They are not helpful. You need a map.
David brought up the Capitol Boulevard project. I'm pretty sure that project, while we haven't gotten an update on it, was paid for out of another funding source.
Out of the two-thirds bond.
Yeah. So that's going around. That's doing the alignment down there through the Six Forks easement that isn't going to be used on Capitol Boulevard, replacing structure. Was it one of the?
That's structure 106. We are that project.
106.
That project is actually currently bid.
Yeah.
It went to bid today, actually.
Yeah. Awesome.
So
Congratulations on that.
That's a big deal.
It's sometimes it's
very big deal.
You get excited about projects, get started, but this one, this is one of them.
That's huge.
You have to go on Twitter to find all the trolls to pull down structure 106.
I'd like to compliment David for he was very assertive with our permitting and our consultants to move that forward probably in 3/4 of the time that it needs to, and Lisa Schiff-Bauer. So it's a big win.
Great news. Great news.
Any other questions for David on these projects or others? Hey, Lindsay.
Thank you, everybody.
Lindsay had a question. Sorry.
Sorry, I was slow to unmute. Not about this project, but about, do you have an update on the Greenway around Shelley Lake? It's not Shelley Lake, it's Crabtree Creek.
Lake Lynn?
No, it's Crabtree Creek. It's between the mall and Shelley Lake. Crabtree Creek Trail, I think.
Along North
So there's a couple projects. There's a retaining wall project.
Could you be talking about Harris Night, maybe?
I don't know what the name of the trail is, but it's between Crabtree Mall and Shelley Lake.
That would be Mine Creek?
That one, probably.
I think she means where the erosion had happened there on North Hills Drive.
Yeah, it's the retaining walls, David.
Yeah.
Yeah, that retaining wall is, we good news and bad news. Bad news is we found that we had to do extension of the existing wall. The good news is that contractor thinks that we can get completed a month earlier than what we had originally scoped. So hopefully mid-October that project will be complete.
Mid-October? Oh, that's cool. That's
usually good news.
The water doesn't rise too high.
Of this year?
Yeah.
Wow, awesome. Cool.
That's weather permitting, as he mentioned.
Oh, true, of course.
Any other questions for David? Thanks for coming to hang out with us.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you, David.
I just have a small point of business. I believe, because this is the last meeting of Clodagh and David, I believe that their staff has something they wanted to share with them. Is there like a thing? I don't know who had them. But we have, thank you for your service flex. That Giovanna's holding up now. So
That's lovely. Thank you. Beautiful.
Yeah, very nice.
I don't see it.
Giovanna's holding it up if you
He's
find
holding it
her
up.
in the panel.
you got to find her. She got to say hi or something.
Yes.
Highlighted.
David, I'm sorry. Unfortunately, we ordered 2 of them for Clodagh, so you're gonna have to get one that says Clodagh Lion Sebastian. So
No, I'll
we
take them
apologize.
both.
Anyway, but thanks again, y'all, for your service. It's been wonderful having y'all on the board. We much appreciate it.
Just get with
Yes,
me and
thank
let
you
me
all
know
for your
if you're
service.
mail them to you, or if you want to come by the office and pick them up.
All right, board comments discussion. Dr. Love.
I just want to say, Clodagh, today, it's been a pleasure working with you, and I wish you well with whatever comes next. I'm sure you'll be up to something.
Thanks, Dr. Love. Do you have any other comments? General announcements?
No, I think Jennifer mentioned earlier about the contract going on. I think for the historic classroom at Tavis, I served on that group to help choose one agency. So I'm happy we're moving forward.
Great. It looks beautiful. All right, I'll just go around my circle here. Charlie.
Didn't want to interrupt the meeting earlier, but for the Fletcher Awards, Mary Owens and her staff are working on selecting a date that works best for staff to have the award recipients from this past year's awards pick up their awards. We've already tentatively scheduled a time slot in May. I think it's May 21st for the 2021 awards if we can host it in person. They're currently looking at one Saturday in either October or November, ideally at Millbrook Exchange Park, given that it has a roundabout to help with traffic. When the date's finalized, I'll send the information out to you all for volunteers to help with the event from our board. Brad, thank you for your leadership as chair. Jennifer, Beverly, congratulations on your election. And Claudia and David, it's been an absolute pleasure working with you over this past 5 years that I've been on the board. And thank you both for your service.
Thanks, Charlie. Carol.
Yes, I joined my fellow board members in congratulating David Millsaps and Clodagh on their achievements, on their time on the board. I will miss them, but I know you can't keep good people down, and we will see them around in other capacities. And I'm happy to share my congratulations with our new chair and vice chair.
Thanks, Carol. Marcia.
Thank you, David and Clodagh, for your service and your enthusiasm for these issues that you each care about. I hope that you'll keep caring for those and being a voice for those things you're passionate about. And Brad, thank you for your leadership on the board. And we look forward to seeing Jennifer and Beverly in their new capacities. It's good to see you all. Missed you last month.
David?
Did you say David?
Yes. Oh, well, I guess, yeah. Millsaps, not
Yeah.
David.
So first of all, congratulations for Jennifer and Beverly. I think you guys will be a wonderful leadership team. Brad and Jennifer, I think you've been the best chair and vice chair that I've served with or under in my time here. And I think the way that you've challenged the status quo around the board has been essential, right? And that change that you've set in motion doesn't seem like it's going to stop. So I look forward to what this new administration brings to the board. I've benefited from my time here probably way more than I've given back. I've learned so much about myself and about how the city works. And what I value in the city. And I'm so thankful to have had that time with you, fellow board members. Also to staff, I admire so much the way that you run this department and the standard to which you hold yourselves. It is truly impressive. And I think you live up to that idea of being being public servants. I'm have become friends with many of you, and I'm so thankful for that. So many of the staff members, I really, really appreciate the chance to have worked with you. There are three things that I think about that the board needs to keep their eye on, and I don't think I realized those three things until very late in my tenure. And they're long-term concerns, and they won't be brought to us or to the board in an action item on the work plan. The first is the threat of water. Water is taking our parks away from us, and it is attacking our greenways, and there doesn't seem to be a long-term plan around it. There are point solutions, and we are repairing the things that are broken by it, but there is not enough collaboration between the stormwater department and the parks department. And I know that there are some pending things there, but we need to be fearful and aware of what water can take away from us. And I also think that in particular, it affects disadvantaged communities disproportionately because they're all downstream. The second thing is the use of data. So I have been so impressed with folks like TJ McCourt and his professional application of data in the department and expanding awareness and understanding and helping us see big problems in simple data sets with visualization and things like that. But the department also uses data very poorly all the time. And we are one of the watchdogs on that. There are all the time we see surveys and research presented as fact, and major decisions are made on it, and there is very little strength behind how that data is put together. And so we need to, TJ just said there's some standards coming around with data collection. That's a huge opportunity to improve the decision making of this department, and I think the board is critical in pressing on that, because that is actually where systemic inequities happen, right? It is in the ignorance around the use of data and the application of it that is created. And the final thing is something we talked about last time, and that's communication. Many, many, many of our problems could be solved with better communication. Communication is technological and operational, and every communication plan that comes out of this department should have those two components. And the board is critical in influencing that and pushing it forward. And it is an opportunity to solve many of the inequities that we talk about here. Everyone knows the value of education, and communication is just the sort of business and community form of education. And there are many communities in Raleigh that don't realize the services that are available to them. And you see the Trenton Road project, right, created by a bunch of well-to-do people that know that if they raise some hell, they can get a better sidewalk, right? I mean, that's a pretty ridiculous project. That's a ridiculous place to put $1 million. And it's very serving of a very narrow community, but it's because they have awareness that there's power in what they can ask for. Every community should have that. So I just see like pushing the department in those three categories, and in particular in communication, will solve so many things. And I hope that the board can continue some of that. I know that I will as a citizen. Don't expect me not to come comment at the beginning of some meetings in the future. Thank you so much.
Dave. Well, Dave, you're up next, and good luck.
Fantastic points. I'll repeat the congratulations and thanks to Brad. Congratulations to Jen and Bev. And David and Clodagh, again, illustrating how you've brought fantastic flavor to our debates, and I will greatly miss both of your insights.
Thanks, Dave. Clodagh.
I'll add myself to the congratulations, and Brad, thanks for the great work. I know how hard you've been at it, and all of the extracurricular things that you've been doing that we don't see from our vantage point, but how hard you've been working. And I am all for a new woman ticket. You guys, ladies, go. I think that's going to be great. Congratulations. Yeah, I'm really sad, and I think David showed us again just now what the fantastic brains that we have on this body, not just the people who are the volunteer capacity, but the staff as well. And I have learned in the last 6 years, I came on originally with really a very singular objective, and that was to advocate for more spaces for dogs and families with dogs. And we were at a point where there were a lot of restrictions being put in place, and I didn't think that was right. So that's why I asked to be put on the board, is to try and work some solutions for that. But in the meantime, I have learned so much about what the parks offer, as far as not just recreation, but education, community, connections, just a really wide variety of things that this branch does and supports the community with, and it's just mind-blowing. And this group of people right here, you guys, I've made some great friendships. They're going to stay, no matter what, they're not going away, and I'm definitely going to follow up and keep up with all the news. And the staff was just wonderful. Again, I came in a time where there was a very rigid thinking around what dogs parks mean, and for a lot of people it's not important, but it ties into the bigger picture, I think, of how we think about the city and how we live in it. And back then there was a view of, well, a dog park is 2 acres of fenced the wood chips, right? That's it. That's what a dog park is. And if you look now, and I'm not claiming any kind of influence for this, any kind of gains for this that I was involved. This was staff. They're looking at how are we going to do things differently, and I will give TJ more kudos on this also again. Being open and saying why does it have to be 2 acres of fenced? Why can't it be a pop-up? Why can't it be something smaller? Why don't we look at this? And that is a huge treasure that we have, and that just doesn't apply just to dog parks. That applies citywide in how we approach problems and how we deal with them. And another thing, I have been a pain in the you-know-what on a number of occasions, and there has never been one time that staff has not been supportive and friendly and completely open, and never a crossword to me in all of the time, even though sometimes I might have deserved it. So thank you to everybody, and I wouldn't have missed it for the world. It was great.
Thanks, Clodagh. Kendall.
David and Claudia, congratulations. David, I appreciate you. I think you and I have bumped heads a couple of times, but I think I've seen growth in you. I think conflict is good. I appreciate you at the end speaking up on inequities. And that's what a lot of people are afraid to talk about. And for that, I appreciate you more. Claudia, I appreciate your passion about dog parks, things like that. Jennifer, you will do a great job. And Bev, I'm looking forward to working with you guys. Brad, I don't do this often, but I'm going to apologize what I said to you earlier. And I don't do it often. I check myself. But also, being disruptive is okay, and dismantling things is okay, and I'm fine with that. And I think that you've done a great job of leading. And as leader, you take the good as well as the bad. That's part about being a leader. So I apologize if I bullied you earlier. There are things on this board that people are passionate about. And I've been working with young people too long for us not to have a voice to be heard. So I apologize to you coming that way. I will not apologize about my voice, right? but I apologize to you personally. And I don't do that often. So I apologize to you there in front of a bunch of grown folks. If I was face to face, I would shake your hand. So I appreciate, as David said, I appreciate you, the way that you've led this board, your consistency, your accuracy, and just showing up on time. And really, I think I was telling somebody the other day, going through this 2020 bond was critical. It was a lot of work. I think I was talking about Dr. Love the other night with her, and I was talking in another meeting. A lot of work and a lot of energy that you put into it belong to this board. So I appreciate that. And David, I honestly say that, man. Hope you don't go far. Your voice needs to be heard, man, because we need more people that are passionate about things that you are. And I do want you to come back and raise hell. And you should, because your voice is critical, man. And I appreciate you saying those things. And good luck. And Bev and Jennifer, I'm looking forward to you guys. So I'm not going nowhere unless somebody asks me to get off. But I'm going to also challenge you two ladies as well. And that's what we do. That's how you grow. And I want everybody to understand that that's how you grow. I don't operate out of fear, but you love other people who ain't your own. And that's how you grow, by challenging people. If you don't want to be challenged, this is not the place to be.
Thank you, Kendall. Good words. Lindsay.
We just had a tree down in our neighborhood and people are panicking and texting and calling me right now.
Call the city.
Oh, man.
I'm like, leave me alone. I'm talking about trees around the city. Just figured I'd let you all know that's going on. But no, I mean, I don't want to be too repetitive, but certainly appreciate the sentiments that David and Clodagh shared this evening, and Brad's leadership, and we'll definitely miss Clodagh and David, and excited about Jennifer, and I think Beverly disappeared.
She did. She fell off. That was the end. That was the end. We pushed her to her limit.
But change and challenge is good for folks to keep growing, and change and challenge helps us grow and evolve more. And so I'm excited about that. And I do appreciate how we've been able to collaborate and contribute to the expertise that staff is leading on, and it's nice to see progress and things. And it's especially hard with the virtual world to keep folks engaged. But I do see that there are, we're providing feedback, and I'm seeing even more explicit instructions on the Parks Board website on how to join our virtual meetings. And I get the notifications for the tweets. And so it's nice to see that it is being shared and more opportunities to engage. And, it takes time for things to even shift as community and culture changes. But anyways, always glad to be here with you. So I don't think I have any other thoughts, but thanks all.
Lindsay, Beverly has left us. A couple other people have as well. So that leaves Jennifer and I. So I'll just briefly say thanks for a great 2 years for those of you who've been around and those of you who've joined during that time. In terms of this, when I started, folks were not comfortable leaning in this way, and I'm so excited that when I leave, that we are relatively comfortable having a 2.5 or 2 3/4 hour meeting together and talking through this stuff and really working through these issues. It's a process to get us to this point where we feel comfortable and familial enough to have these conversations, and so I really appreciate it. And that's all on y'all. So thank you for all that. Thanks for all your support. And Clodagh and David, you know how much I care about y'all. So anyway, Jennifer, I'm passing the baton to you. You may wrap this up.
Well, kind of springboarding off of you saying how we're leaning in more, I'm going to be leaning on you still a lot, Brad. So thank you for your leadership and for kind of showing me the way. And I'm going to try my best to keep kind of the momentum going. Like David said, I think that, we're really doing some good things and making some big strides. And so I with all of your input, thanks for the vote of confidence. And I think my biggest goal will just be to make sure everyone's voice is heard and that we can all really contribute and feel like we've had a piece of this, and that we're here for a reason. We have a purpose, and that there's a reason why we're having these 3-hour meetings, that something good comes out of it, which I think it does. So I look forward to serving in this position and with Beverly. So thanks for that. And Oscar, my kids and I called in every day for the joke of the day. So thank you for that. That was really helpful during those tough times in April. And we made some of the arts and crafts, so much appreciated. David and Clodagh, gonna miss you guys so much, but I do really hope that you do come and join our meetings and call in. And if not, I'll shoot you some texts on some important things that I think you might care about. So thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Any objection to an adjournment? Great. Thanks, guys.
Have a good
Have a great month.
Bye.
All right. Have a great evening.
See you next time.